Thank you. So welcome to this webinar. This is a webinar of the webinar series of the Covenant of Mayors Activate Your SECAP, and we will focus on energy performance contracting. And this webinar was jointly organized by the Covenant of Mayors Europe and the Smart EPC project. And the webinar is recorded. So we will start, first of all, with an introduction on what energy performance contracting is, explained by Josip Cengia from the Northwest Regional Energy Agency of Croatia. And then Valerie Plemenson, Director of the European ESCO Associations, will present us the ESCO model and how local authorities can work with ESCOs to advance on their project. Then we will have a 5 minutes break where my colleagues will split us into breakout rooms. Please do add the name of the room, either 1 or A or 2 or B, next to your names to facilitate my colleagues' work. In the breakout rooms, we will go into deeper discussions on energy performance contracting. And we will also have 2 case studies. In breakout room 1 for local authorities, we will have a presentation from what's done in Murcia in Spain by, again, Josip Cengia. And then in breakout room 2 or B, we will focus on how to support local authorities on energy performance contracting with Ivan Przuli from Always Regea, and we will present the case studies of Karlovac in Croatia. And then we will come back all together in this bigger room for a close-up. So I will stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Josip to start the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mariangela. Just a second.
Sorry to interrupt, Josip, if I may. Mariangela, just one more clarification regarding the breakout rooms. So what the people need to do, they need to add 1 or 2 or A to B on their names here on the Teams?
Yes,
okay.
That's all. My colleagues will then split them.
Okay, so we need to change our names or to add a name. All right, okay, thank you.
And if you don't know how to change your names, it's easy. You just go next to the 3 dots in your name where you see people and rename yourself.
Okay. Yeah, you can see my presentation now. Everything's working. So good morning, everyone. Once again, we would like to welcome you to this hands-on training on energy performance contracting. In this first part of this webinar, we're going to give you an introduction into energy performance contracting. What does it mean? How does it differ from the traditional types and procurement models that we use in our everyday life? So my name is Josip Cengia. I'm an expert advisor in Northwest Region Energy Agency in Croatia, and my expertise are in preparation, development, and procurement of alternative procurement models. I'll be presenting you this introduction part into EPC, while when we go to our breakout rooms, I'll be joined with a colleague of mine, Ivan Przuli, who will be presenting to the facilitators and ESCO companies on Smart EPC in more detail. So to answer the question about energy performance contracting and what it is, first of all, we need to define what we mean when we say traditional models. So when we talk about traditional models, we are talking about the model that is still predominant model for investments in public infrastructure. And it is still perceived to be a faster and more simpler way to complete complex infrastructure projects. Why is this the case? Just because we are all used to it. It's the way we have always done things, and the procedure, documentation, and the role of the stakeholders are known to us. And this is why most of people perceive this traditional model to be faster and simpler than alternative procurement models. Its main characteristic of the traditional model, the main characteristic is that a public authority or a client is acting in a role of investor. And he finances all of the project expenses either through budget or through loans. So it finances them through bank loans or through its own public budget. if we are to put this kind of connections between stakeholders, these contractual connections and obligations between stakeholders in project realization in a graphics, you see the picture on the right side of this slide showing you how this would look like. So as you can see, the authority is practically in the center of this picture, and it has contractual connections to every single stakeholder in the project realization phase. So authority would, in the role of investor, first contract or procure development of design documentation. Then it would separately procure construction of the facility based on the design documentation. And later on, it would procure and contract the maintenance and operation company to operate and maintain that facility. All of that would be financed either through loan or through the budget of authority. As you can see, there is connection between authority and all of these stakeholders, but there is no contractual connections between rest of them. So there is no practically obligations or no contractual relationship between designer and contractor or contractor and finance company. What does that mean, and what this contractual arrangements result in is practically that the most of the project risks are allocated to the authority side. And what do we mean by this? Just a simple case. In most of the cases, public sector client will procure and contract development of design documentation. Once it's done, design partner would be paid off, and we would then procure construction company to construct that facility based on that design documentation that we have developed. Most of the faults from design documentations will be seen only in the construction phase. By then, we have already paid off our design companies, and all of the faults and the costs that rise up from that faults will be, of course, borne by authority. So it's not the construction company's mistake, nor fault, nor problem if the development, if design documentation was poorly developed, and if there are some unsolved issues. The cost of dealing with those problems will be borne by authority. Same will happen in maintenance. If facility is constructed poorly, if there is lack in quality of materials, most of this will be seen later on in usage and operation phase. Again, it's not a problem of maintenance company why facility was poorly constructed, and all of these additional costs will be borne by authority. And that's how most of the project risks in the traditional way of procuring projects will fall onto the investor. So allocations of most project risks in traditional models is borne by public sector authority. Opposed to that, traditional models, alternative procurement models practically represent a number and various number of different kinds of models that all have the same specifics, and that are trying to shift the role of public sector client or a client in general from the role of investor to the role of purchaser of goods and services. Now, this seems quite simple when we say this, but of course it implies a lot of changes to the project realization, to the project management, and of course a lot of changes to the allocation of the risks in the projects. Alternative models are perceived to be highly complex and quite time-consuming, but this is only due to the case that they're still new. A lot of officials, public officials from public administration haven't used them, so they haven't been familiarized with the roles of public sector clients in management of this kind of projects. They don't know how to procure it. They don't know how to write up specifications and contracts. And in most cases, especially for the first few projects that will be procured by municipality or ministry or any public sector client, you will need to have consultants, agencies, or some other form of facilitators to help you procure these projects. And then it would be much simpler to do it, of course, again. As I said at the start, the main characteristic of alternative procurement models is that they shift the role of allocation of risks from the side of the authority to the side of contractor. And how do they do that? If you look at the right side of this slide, you see that opposed to traditional way, here the authority is no longer in the center of project realization. So we have just one contractual connection between authority and special purpose vehicle. This vehicle is practically private sector partner and can be either a consortium of all of these stakeholders, or one of these stakeholders will take on the role of investor and will contract other stakeholders to bring all together services and works in order to finish the project and provide service or a good to authority. In this case, since the authority has only one contract with service special purpose vehicle, it's much easier to control all the risks in the project. And of course, it's much easier to allocate them to private sector side. Now, since the private partner is practically the investor, most of the project risks are allocated to them, and the authority is in the role of a purchaser of a good and service, and that means that he will only pay for the service and the good he has received, and will not take on the responsibility for successfully managing whole project. He will pay for the outputs of the project, not for the effort in providing those outputs. So in general, and this would be the simplest way to define the differences between the traditional and alternative procurement models. When we talk about alternative procurement models, the most common ones are named here are public-private partnerships, and in essence, these are DBFMO projects in development and mostly in construction of new public sector infrastructure. So whether it's being used to construct hospitals, schools, or highways, or any other infrastructural types of projects. DBFMO stands for Design, Build, Finance, Maintain, and Operate model, and in essence, it tells you what it includes, what this model includes. So under one contract, public sector client will procure design documentation, construction of the facility. It will all be financed by private sector company, and that facility will be maintained and operated by that private sector company. When we talk about EPCs, energy performance contracts, in essence, those are PPPs or DBFMO projects in implementations of energy efficiency measures. So EPC is quite a known model amongst energy agencies and amongst municipalities and private public sector clients that have tried to implement some kind of energy efficiency measures. The third model, also quite known, is power purchase agreements, and these are practically DBFMO models in provision of electric production or energy production of any kind. So they are quite oftenly used as a model to procure supply of energy from renewable energy sources. Of course, today we'll be talking mostly about EPC. So to give you a few more details into energy performance contracting. Energy performance contract is practically a contract where an energy service company is obliged to provide energy efficiency services to a client. Energy service company stands for ESCO, and this is why an EPC is also quite often called an ESCO model. It's practically the synonym. And in the heart of this contract and in the heart of this model is, of course, the provision of energy efficiency services and guaranteeing of energy savings. So in EPC contracts, ESCO company develops design documentation for implementation of energy efficiency measures. They finance them, they implement them, and then ESCO company guarantees for energy savings to its clients. If energy savings are not achieved, and this is also a characteristic of EPCs, there should be penalties or reduction of payments for energy efficiency service. In essence, what does that mean? That means that all of the energy efficiency measures should be repaid solely and directly from achieved energy savings. So this is, I would say, the main characteristic of energy performance contracts. What's also very important to note is that these energy savings should be in EPC contracts regularly monitored and verified. So we are not talking about theoretical savings, we are talking about real life savings where those savings need to be monitored and verified on a regular basis. And what does that mean? That means the period where we control energy savings shouldn't be longer than 1 year. So they should be verified on monthly, quarterly, or yearly periods. Now, when we talk about EPC, and for most of you that have maybe Googled or have some experience in EPC and have tried to explore about on best case, best business cases or best case studies on EPCs throughout Europe, you will see that in most cases, these good examples of EPC models are projects that are being realized in public lighting systems. So why is that the case? Well, in essence, EPC project development and EPC project is a bit complex. So we need to define energy efficiency measures, you need to implement them, and you need to guarantee the savings. And when you think about buildings opposed to street lighting infrastructure, then street lighting infrastructure is less complex than buildings. And this is why EPCs present maybe a first ideal step for clients to get to know with EPC types of contracts and models, because it's quite easier to procure them, and it's quite easy to measure and verify the results of energy savings. So it's quite transparent. So this type of models in public lighting infrastructure are quite feasible, and they present an ideal first step for public sector clients to get used to this alternative procurement models. When we are talking about advantages of EPC in public lighting, well, first off, we can say that the public lighting operating regime is very easily defined. Of course, what does that mean? You know that in buildings, operating regime is defined by the needs of the clients using that building. And throughout the years, these operating regimes can change, not just throughout years, but throughout days, months, weeks. When we are talking about public lighting infrastructure, we don't have that problems. Of course, public lighting infrastructure, public lights are switched off during the nighttime, and we can quite easily specify working hours of street lighting system for the next 10 to 15 years. So it's quite, I would say, foreseeable, and it's quite easy to specify. On the other hand, street lighting systems are also quite simple systems from a technical point of view. It's quite easy to define the points where responsibility of a public sector client will stop, and where the responsibility of an ESCO company will begin. So it can be, you can say that the point of responsibility can be cabinets, can be poles, can be wires, or can be luminaires. So you can practically quite easily define the scope of the project, and you can quite easily define responsibility for functionality of that part of public lighting system to the ESCO company. When you have buildings, it can be quite complex buildings with complex installations. It can be quite difficult to define responsibility for functionality of whole building if you didn't give the whole building to the ESCO company to manage and operate. So this is why public lighting is quite simpler infrastructure for EPC to be used in. Another advantage is that replacement of old luminaires with new ones results in high energy savings. So in most cases, if you have sodium changes of sodium luminaires to LED luminaires, you're going to find your energy savings being from 60 to 70, even 80%. With those kind of savings and with this prices of energy that we have seen for the last 2 or 3 years, most EPC projects will be feasible under 10 years, which then makes an EPC altogether feasible because it can be financed by an ESCO company throughout this time period. As we said, it's quite easy to monitor and control energy consumption in public lighting. You just practically compare your monthly energy bills, and you see how much energy you're using, and it's quite easy to shift the responsibility to the party that is responsible for achieving those energy savings. Also, it's quite easy to see the status of luminaires. Are they working or not? Of course, if they are not working, then we have achieved energy savings because they are not using energy. So, and of course, that this is not the goal. The goal is to achieve energy savings with all of the luminaires working. So, in public lighting infrastructure, it's quite easy to see whether the quality of the service is provided under the functionality of the main service, and that is providing light on public surfaces. So it's quite easy to monitor, it's quite transparent, and it's easy to verify that everything is okay. Another advantage of EPCs in public lighting is that additional savings in maintenance costs over the years can be used for upgrading other elements of street lighting systems and infrastructure, or even for implementations of new services to public lighting infrastructure, which we'll talk more about when we present Smart EPC. But as I said, all of energy efficiency measures should be repaid purely out of energy savings. So all other savings that you will have in maintenance cost, and you will have savings in maintenance cost because ESCO company should maintain all the equipment that ESCO company has installed under an EPC contract, will of course be free for you to use it to upgrade the rest of your infrastructure. So these are additional benefits in EPC, especially in public lighting infrastructure. Simple payback periods are, as we said, usually under 10 years, which makes financing much easier for ESCO companies. This is due to the fact that when ESCO companies are trying to search and obtain third-party financing, mostly from the banks, loan from the banks or other types of debts, then a 10-year lifespan is what you would find to be the longest periods for financing these types of projects. So if you would to have financing, if you were to search financing for 15 or 20 years, it would be much harder, and you would need much larger investments to support that kind of financing, and much complexer financing models to do so. So it's quite easy to finance the EPCs in public lighting infrastructure. As I said earlier, this is we talked about and have tried to explain what EPC is. Now, what do we mean when we talk about Smart EPC? Well, in essence, a Smart EPC is a Horizon 2020 project, which is trying to do a research and test the theory and the hypothesis: can we combine energy and other energy and non-energy services with an EPC project to make the EPC project more effective? So in our efforts to try to answer this through Smart EPC project, we will try to develop, and we have tried, and we are now at this time practically at the end of this Smart EPC project. We have developed a Smart EPC concept, which stands for a standardized set of documents and tools to help municipalities and facilitators and energy agencies in development and procurement of EPC projects in public lighting. To try to test this concept, we have we have 6 pilots in 4 different countries. So 2 in Spain, 2 in Poland, 1 in France, 1 in Croatia. We'll be presenting 2 of them later on today, where we have tested and tried to prove that Smart EPC concept is feasible and is practically market ready. So in essence, what Smart EPC is trying to do, it's trying to combine under a single contract the reconstruction and modernization of public lighting systems with other energy and non-energy services that use public lighting infrastructure. These services can be non-energy services, such as smart city applications, 5G communications, etc., and energy services, like e-charging service provided to citizens. When we talk about these potential added services to standard EPC project, we can talk then, we can divide those services again into potentially commercial services and non-commercial services. So potentially commercial services could be 5G concessions and e-charging concessions. So you can give the right to a private sector party to provide that service to the market, to citizens, and get revenue from that in case of e-charging, or you can practically give right to private sector company to give concessions, 5G concessions to telecommunications companies and get some revenue out of that. So these are new revenue streams that you can attach to standard EPC. Non-commercial services like smart city applications, of course, in this time have maybe less or no commercial value. That doesn't mean it will stay like that in next 5 to 10 years. But at this moment, for those non-commercial type of applications, they can be financed out of those additional savings that EPC will provide in maintenance. So as we said, EPC must be repaid solely out of energy savings. And when we are talking about energy savings, we are not calculating the maintenance savings in maintenance costs, which then can be used in order to implement sensors and other smart city applications that can upgrade the public service provided by public lighting infrastructure. In essence, and we'll go through that a bit more and in bit more detail in breakout rooms. Smart EPC consortium has developed fact sheets and Smart EPC handbook in order to help facilitators, municipalities, and all interested parties in preparation, development, and procurement of these projects. As I said later on, we'll go into more details into breakout rooms. I think I'm right on time. Yeah, so this is all from me for now.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, so as we lost a bit of time, I will move directly to Valerie Plemanson, and then you can ask all your questions during the breakout rooms, because in any case, Joseph and his colleague Ivan will be there. Valerie? I cannot hear you or see you.
Is it okay? I think you can hear me now.
Yes, perfect.
Yes,
I can also see you.
Excellent. So thank you for giving me the floor. My name is Valérie Pleine-Maison. I'm Secretary General of EFIES, the European Federation for Energy Efficiency Services. And I'm going to share with you my presentation. I'm going to speak to you about ESCOs, which is a complementary presentation of the previous one, which was focused on energy performance contracting that are provided mainly by ESCOs. To some extent, an ESCO doesn't make only energy performance contracting, and energy performance contracting can be provided not only by ESCOs, but ESCOs are, let's say, one of the main operators of energy performance contracting.
And Valerie, I apologize to interrupt you. May you please go to full screen?
Yes, this is what I was just about to do. Thank you. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So just a few words about us to make things clear. EFIES is the European Federation for Energy Efficiency Services. So in one word, it would be European Federation of ESCOs. We've been created in 2005. Our members are national associations or sometimes companies, ESCOs. working in energy efficiency services. Our objectives are to promote and make recognized better recognition of energy efficiency services and ESCOs at EU level. We're talking about private ESCOs here, but okay, ESCOs may not be 100% private. That's also part of this landscape of energy efficiency services. So we work on the legislative framework at EU level, in particular on the Energy Efficiency Directive. So an ESCO, what is an ESCO? ESCO means Energy Services Company, and it was defined, legally speaking, in the Energy Efficiency Directive of 2006, in an article that you can look at this directive. So an ESCO is a natural or legal person. So mostly it's a legal person. Let's say it's a company. But if it's a natural person, it could be a consultant, provided that it can deliver energy services, energy efficiency services mainly, energy efficiency improvement measures in a user's facility. So ESCOs are characterized by the fact that they accept a certain degree on financial risk, which we also say it's operational risk. And the payment of the service is based on the achievement of energy efficiency improvement. That's the legal definition. So in other words, an ESCO is a company that offers energy-related or energy efficiency services to final energy users. Which include not only energy efficiency projects, but also possibly renewable energy projects or any energy-related project for the end user, turnkey basis. And the services cover possibly all energy needs of the clients, which can be heating, cooling, ventilation, lighting, and optimization of all the interrelations between those needs. So the ESCOs are not only working on reducing the energy demand, but on the basis of the needs of the client. So it's not going to switch off the radiator, but to optimize the use of it. So the main ESCOs characteristics is that they design and engage on a level of energy performance or energy cost reduction, and they bear the operational risk. That was already explained in the previous presentation, where energy performance contracting or other kinds of contract imply that the energy services operators take the lead and take the responsibility for the running of the equipment and the energy efficiency improvement measures, preceded by a design and an auditing step, which leads also to measuring the future improvements in energy use. So measuring before and after is one of the key actions that is made by an ESCOs, which means that the ESCO have a knowledge on the protocols for measuring energy use, energy consumption. It was also mentioned that the energy performance contracting or other kinds of contracts have a performance guarantee, and the performance guarantee can take several forms. So once again, there is not only one type of ESCOs. ESCOs can be big, small, private, not private, work on certain kind of clients. It's very various, and the performance guarantee can take several forms, but it's contractually guaranteed. So that's also in the ESCOs characteristics if they work under energy performance contracting. One other characteristic is that the remuneration of ESCOs is in many or in most contracts directly linked to the energy savings achieved, which is totally different from a contract where you would sell an equipment and that's the end of the story. Very important is also the next point, where ESCOs finance or assist in arranging and consolidating different financing sources. Financing sources in energy efficiency projects. Let's say that would be a housing complex. There could be different sources. There could be public funding. There could be clients' own resource, the condominium. There could be ESCO financing for some percent of it. There could be bank loans. There could be all together. And this is a very can be complex financing engineering, where the ESCOs is important partners, as much as they are partners for energy, for designing the energy use of the installation. So and of course the energy savings guarantee is a key element for financing, for giving trust to the banks or to the other financing partners. ESCOs also provide staff training if they work with their own staff, but of course as well if they work with the client's staff. And let's say if they work with an industry, so they work with the engineers of the industry that industrial need to produce, well, for instance, steel, but the ESCOs works together with the steel industry and the steel workers to maintain a very stable heating production, in industrial heat process production. So staff training and client coaching, that's particularly important in housing sector, where clients, where households have to be or may be trained or may be informed in how to best use their heating installations to ensure optimal system operation and control as well. So that's some of the main ESCOs characteristics in as far as the operational part is concerned. Other characteristics can be very various. As I said, legal characteristics can be very various. Size of the ESCOs can be various. There are smaller ESCOs, there are bigger ESCOs, because there are smaller clients and bigger clients. There are ESCOs which are mostly in the audit and design sector, and ESCOs which cover audit and design and operation, of course. So that ESCOs is a very wide family. Years ago, some financing institutions were also named ESCOs, but they were financial ESCOs, not operational ESCOs. So I think here we speak about ESCOs in the operational side. So here, just a few words about how ESCO work. I would not get into too many details. They work on the basis of performance guarantee model or share saving model. But this would get into too many detail that can be complex. And here it's not about presenting the contracts, but it's just to say that the contractual know-how of ESCOs is also very important. Of course, it looks a bit more complex than just having a client to whom you sell equipments and then he manages the equipments himself. But it's the ESCO model allows for financing, for long-time operation, for energy savings that pay part of the investment or all the investment in some cases. So typical ESCO projects will include all those following elements, from preliminary evaluation to final operation and maintenance, and of course communication with the client. I'm not going to get through all those items, but this shows in complement with the previous presentation that ESCOs work, engage the operations from the very beginning, and they cover heating, cooling, lighting, ventilation. As I said, they can also cover when there is a deep renovation, for instance. They can also cover subcontractors in the for the buildings envelope that the ESCOs will not repair themselves, but that they will include in the contract's specifications, because that will be an improvement in the end users facility, the end users building, and that has of course a big impact on energy efficiency and on energy use. So the client can be very diverse: a building, housing, private, public buildings, whatever kind of buildings. It can be a public body, for instance, offices of the municipality, or school, or university, or hospital. It can be also an industrial facility. So this variety of client shows that ESCOs develop a very, very accurate know-how on how to make energy efficiency actions. They, of course, include IT technologies, but also human control and design. For the client, one of the advantage is not only the competence of the ESCOs, but also that the client manage a single contract and a single contractor. This is why I mentioned renovation actions. Instead of having two contracts, one with the contractor and the other one with the energy savings company, one ignoring each other, which makes in the end impossible to guarantee a level of action or a level of consumption. If the energy performance contracts covers also the renovation action made, as far as the contraction is concerned, by the relevant professionals, at least it's covered by one contract and one contractor, which makes the life of the clients easier to some extent, and legally more certain. So this is the idea of the one-stop shop. One-stop shop is a very well-known word and probably very useful for individual households needing to have an information contact point and a facilitator for their individual home energy efficiency actions. But as soon as there is a complex building or industry or action to be done, so more than at individual household level, the ESCO acts as a one-stop shop, or the energy performance contract acts as a one-stop shop, which is also promoted in the EU legislation. The important point is also that ESCO work over time. So they have a holistic approach. They cover all the interactions in the energy system. More cooling means more heating, which means again more. So they cover all those retrofit loops. They have a dynamic approach, and they work under certain time contracts, several years, sometimes less than 10 years, sometimes more than 10 years, which covers planning and integration of all energy efficiency measures, and which results in better results. This also implies that there is an integrated procurement process in comparison to repeated procurement processes, which would be requested by alternative or traditional approaching. So the integrated procurement process is twofold. First, there is one public procurement process by the client selecting the ESCO, and then the ESCO is also involved in an integrated procurement process when doing the choices of technologies or equipments of work. But this is also a very, very important thing with regards to national legislations on private and public procurement. So this would be all from my side to give an overview on what are ESCOs. ESCOs are a quite dynamic market in Europe. It's a bit sometimes surprising why they would not develop more, quicker. They have a real growth, depending in each member states of the national framework. For instance, there can be competition against the ESCO model by public funding. Let's imagine a public subsidies to efficient boilers, full stop. That's against the ESCO development. You buy your boiler, you get subsidies for it, and you do not need an ESCO before or after. So development of ESCOs can be dependent on national regulations or subsidies schemes, because even if you have an ESCO as a partner, you may or you will use public funding schemes to finance a certain part of some equipments or renovation task or whatsoever. But in one word, the ESCOs market is quite differentiated in the different member states across Europe, quite dynamic in some of them, more mature in some member states than in other ones. I have put on my screen two references. One is the Research Center of European Union, GRC, which has lots of references on energy service companies, and they do every 2 years a survey on energy efficiency services, ESCOs and contracts. So it's a good way of informing yourselves about ESCOs market and contracts. And this other one, Quality, is an EU project we've been participating in that had as a goal to elaborate quality criteria in energy efficiency contracts, be they energy performance contracting or other types of contract like chauffage contracts or in any kind of simpler contract, which is still energy services and which is still provided by ESCOs. So why ESCOs and why their contracts are not that widely developed? It's probably, well, it's shown by surveys, it's because of perceived complexity. So to struggle against this hurdle of perceived complexity and lack of trust, if you don't understand something, you're not trusting it, then this project has elaborated 9 criteria on the contract that has to be developed by ESCOs. And this is a very interesting project showing a bit the insights of the energy efficiency services companies' work and their contracts. And this would be my conclusion.
Thanks a lot, Valerie.